So you can see, like the original question was talking about the two different lampstands and their different roles. Well, you can see how intricate this stuff is, and that's the whole idea of the synagogue service, right? So the synagogue service is, this stuff is reflected in they did the synagogue, and that's where you can begin to see the breakdown, the difference between the Elijah witness, the priestly witness, and the Moses witness, the kingly witness.
Confused about something.
Just one thing?
With you, sir, I take it one at a time. Okay, we've been talking about who's the bride. Well, what about, they talk about the witnesses, was it? There's another group.
What, the virgins that attend the bride, the bridesmaids?
I just went blank. Well, that too, but I'm just kind of confused about, this is my first non-traditional revelation study, and I haven't been in one of those since I first came in like 25 years ago, so I'm kind of lost.
Well, see, what you're dealing with is in Greek thinking, linear thinking, we attach one thing to one thing, right?
Yeah, we've been through that.
That's not Hebrew thinking at all.
I agree.
For example, in Revelation 12, who's the woman? Well, you start going through all the different scenarios, right? Because, the woman is the mother of the child, but the woman is also the bride of the child. She's also the sister of the child. See, in the Hebrew mind, they don't have any problem. In the Song of Solomon, by the way, the woman clothed with the sun and with the stars, she's the sister of the bridegroom, right? She's also the wife of the bridegroom. Again, she's also the mother of the bridegroom. So who's the woman in Revelation 12? Well, depending on what scenario question you're asking, that woman becomes different people in different situations. And so the Hebrew mind has no problem with that. And that's the whole point of a symbol. But see, in our Greek thinking, we think, the idea of the woman being his mother and his bride and his sister all at the same time, we think, well, that doesn't make any sense. No, because the woman actually represents people in different relationships to Christ, and there's different relationships. And each of those relationships are legitimate.
Okay, like, my Greek thinking's trying to slide back in there.
Well, just like we can all think of ourselves as sons and daughters of God and also as his bride.
That's right. That's right. So the virgins who attend the bridegroom and the bride are also part of the bride. They also become a symbol of the bride. I mean, so yeah. So when you get too rigid in your thinking of the symbol, then you miss this. You start missing the symbol.
It's like you're talking about, it's like thinking that Christ is my savior, but he's also God, and he's also my brother.
Husband, he's our husband.
That's right.
He's our elder brother.
So you can do the same thing when you say, well, who's the priest? So you ask, okay, so who's the priest? Of what, you ask? Right, because there's a priest of the family. Who's the priest of the family?
The husband.
It's supposed to be the husband, right? And then, of course, originally, who was to be the priest after was supposed to be the firstborn son. But then, when you deal with a larger group, well, then who's the priest of your church? Who's the priest of your local group?
Pastor.
Well, then who's the priest in the temple? So you start taking the group that you're talking about, enlarging it, and you start asking who's the priest, and all the priests are symbols of who?
Jesus.
Jesus. So Jesus is ultimately the priest. So the point here is that if you think that the answer to who's the priest is only one answer, well then you're missing the whole point. You're missing the context. So we need to be flexible in our thinking especially when you're looking at the symbols of Revelation. That's what makes them so dynamic.
That's why you used to run us through the thing about who fit in the three parts of the kingdom. who was in the deity position and who was in the kingly position and who was in the priestly position in each particular scenario.
Right. And then add to this that you're not just talking about Christ's kingdom, you're also talking about
Satan's, yeah.
time. So there's a positive and negative to everything we're talking about. So, Satan has a numbered group, and Satan has a bride, and Satan also has many waters, and Satan has, Satan is mimicking God's kingdom by the way he sets up his own kingdom. Of course, he has to. Kingdoms only work one way. So he has to set up his kingdom based on the same principles of kingdom dynamics. So that's why you have the harlot queen who plays the role, and she has many daughters, and there's also many waters. And so you deal with the same idea that happens with the harlot queen and Satan's kingdoms that you're dealing with God's kingdom.
So it seems like this chiastic structure, the truth of it is coming down to Revelation 12 through 15 to understand that when Michael stands up, he is the supreme, he has dominion, he has sovereignty, he regains the earth again and has dominion over that. That's the essential truth of this chiastic structure that you have to come away from, I would think, in Revelation.
Right. So Revelation 12, Christ is Michael, he's exalted to the throne. Revelation 14, he's a lamb standing with 144,000. Also in Revelation 14, he's sitting on the cloud with a crown on his head. So the center of this is when Christ becomes king. That's when all out war takes place, right? Because that's the same thing that happens, same time that happens. That's when Satan actually coronates the beast of the earth as his king. That's the healing of the wound. And that's where there's conflict between Michael and Satan and the dragon and Michael and this beast, right? So that's Satan, the lamb and the beast. So that's the center of the chiastic structure in Revelation, is that conflict over who is the king. That's right. By the way, that's the same point the book of Daniel is making.
And so in Revelation 14, then, as it says in Philadelphia, let nobody take your crown. So we are reflecting the subjects of his kingdom, that is Christ, as he's becoming king in Revelation 14 by having the testimony of Christ and maintaining his character, that we are subjects of his kingdom at that point.
That's right. And we also become kings and priests unto God, right?
That's what we talked about last night, yeah.
Right. So when he comes, he's the King of Kings. Well, who are those other kings? Well, the other kings are whoever of us that God is making. Of course, we're all become kings and queens of God, but the point is that he's king over other kings. And when we get to heaven, we'll wear crowns because we're kings and priests unto God, all of us, kings and queens, right? So the point here is that, yes. So it's just, so the kingship of Christ is actually the maturing. It's the final revelation of Christ. It's the maturing of the initial issue that started the controversy in the first place. It's the maturing of the issue, so that this is the final revelation. This is the fullness of the revelation. That's why it happens at the end, right? Because that's what causes the end. There's no more light to reveal, settle this conflict. The light has been shined. Now everyone has to choose, and the conflict is going to be done.
And this is goes in part why in Daniel 11, when he hears news from the east, that seems to relate to the sealing of the angel that comes and seals in Revelation 7:2.
Right.
And so when that happens, then he goes out to annihilate, and he's enraged by this process.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
And there's no more light because the kingdoms of God have been established.
right. So the angel from the east, the sealing from the east, that happens at his wedding. That's when the bride receives her name, right? Remember the Egyptian seal I showed you? It shows you the seal, the king and the queen and the messenger. There's 3 parts of the kingdom. The seal is given at the wedding. So that's the whole point. The sealing. So the angel rises because the Son of Righteousness in Malachi, the Son of Righteousness rises with healing in his beams. That Son of Righteousness is God, is Christ. He's the Son of Righteousness. His face shines like the sun. He's the King. And so when his bride receives his name, she receives that seal, his name, she becomes a revelation of that light on the earth to the people of the world. That's where Revelation 12 starts, right? The woman is clothed with the sun, standing on the moon with the 12 stars. She's shining the light, the revelation of the character of Christ to the world. That's why the dragon hates her and tries to destroy her. Because Satan can't attack God in heaven. He's been cast to this earth. So now he fights against the revelation of Christ and his people here on earth and tries to stop that light from shining so that the world can stay in darkness and not understand who God is.
Mhm.
Like the 4th angel where the earth is lightened with the glory of God at that point.
That's right. Same idea. And so you see it you're actually seeing it multiple times because it's happening with different groups at different times.
Can you talk about the second part of the chiasm, the second candlestick? Specifically, how did you connect the plagues in chapter 16 with the heavenly church in the New Jerusalem in 21 and the harlot and the many waters with the casting down of the dragon?
Oh, so the second chiastic structure?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand the end points in the center, but kind of the middle ones.
Yeah, well, this one has some strengths and weaknesses. But I think that, of course, I didn't dive into the details to show the connections. I just put the same headings that I put. But the second structure, it says structure within a structure. You'll notice the high points, first of all, is that, it starts with the day of the Lord, it ends with the day of the Lord, and then the 7 standing ups in 12 through 15 deal with the day of the Lord, the revelation of the King. So you see the 3 A's work just really nicely together. The second thing that you see is that you see also the apex of the 2 halves, again, go to the 7 seals and the ride on the white horse, and the marriage of the Lamb and the ride of the white horse, which is sound revelation stuff. You look at the four different B's, okay, the 4 B's, the wilderness church, and then the 7 trumpets. There's no problem with that connection whatsoever.
That's easy. It's the second half that I'm not quite understanding.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer your question, except to dig into the details. I think that actually the 7 plagues, we see them as a negative, but actually the 7 plagues are the beginning of the process of recreation. But for the wicked, that's destructive. But for God's people, it's restorative. Mrs. White talks about God's people going through the plagues because there's earthliness in them that still needs to be purged out. So they're clean and they're truly his bride. And so the 7 plagues are not just a negative process. They're actually a positive process for God's people, the gold refined in the fire. And so the 7 plagues actually are connected to the revelation of the heavenly church, the bride actually being pure is part of the cleansing process.
Okay.
And by the way, that part is probably the hardest part to explain, seeing a connection. So
Well, we have to remember too, on a chiastic situation, that A is not always A. In other words, sometimes it's an opposite. So sometimes the chiasm is something where it'll be a positive and then it'll be a negative that reflects that positive.
right. So like, for example, the 2 C's on the second half, you have the harlot and many waters, and that's connected to the casting down of the dragon, right? But the 2 C's on the beginning, you have the exalting of the Lamb and the bride of the many waters. So you can see how one is dealing with the kingdom of Christ and and his bride, and then the other deals with the dragon and his bride.
Mhm.
So you can see, right. So sometimes, as we all know, sometimes there's similarities and sometimes it's by contrast.
That's right.
My mind kind of got stuck on what you said about the plagues being a positive for God's people. Now, if you go back to Egypt and the plagues that happened there, did that work the same way there too, sir?
Yeah, it was supposed to. Yes.
So
Well, that's how
I
they were
never
released.
thought of a plague as a positive until you brought that up.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is the children of Israel in Egypt have been indoctrinated with Egyptian thought, right? And so
Right.
the plagues are just as much a process of having them give up on this Egyptian philosophy, Egyptian way of life, Egyptian gods, as he was trying to do with the Egyptians,
Because all the plagues were showing them that their gods really weren't God.
right? And that's
Oh,
why the first couple plagues are connected, are the same as the first signs that Moses gives the children of Israel, because they have an Egyptian mindset. So, the whole turning the staff to a snake, that's one of the signs he gave to Israel. The whole idea of turning water to blood was one of the signs that he gave to Israel. The other sign that he was given to Israel that he didn't give to Egypt was when he put his hand in, remember, it became leprous, and then he puts his hand back. So that sign he doesn't give to the Egyptians. So, but that's the sign that he does. So the point here is that the first couple signs that Moses gives to the children of Israel is the same signs that he gives to the Egyptians, because their mindset is the same. And that's a problem. Of course, that's part of what I was talking about, the king of the south. Whenever the end comes, God's people are always slaves to the king of the south. They have the same mindset. That's exactly, the proof that I'm talking about.
But that kind of addresses my question, because God's been taking me back over what I grew up in, and all the king of the south, materialism and humanism and relativism stuff. And then the first couple of churches that I came into were Sunday keeping churches, and they were mystic churches. So I was wondering how God was going to get all of us that out of us, because we might know it's there, but I don't think we can get it out of ourselves.
Well, no.
We can consent to him getting it out.
We need to recognize the issue, right?
Yeah.
By the way, this is Laodicea's big problem. Laodicea is a materialist. We're materialists. That's king of the south. That's why we're rich and increased with goods and think we have no need. That's materialism. That's secular humanism. Jesus is outside knocking again, but we think we're fine without him. That's secular humanism. So, that's clearly our problem. So that it's very connected with the process of the plagues, of the things that God is trying to get us to give up on.